Hello, Becky from Chimera Crafting here, and welcome to my second tutorial video. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the skein that we are going to be over dyeing today. And you may well remember it from the tutorial video that I did a couple of weeks ago, where I just used basic primary colours and used an immersion method in a water bath in order to just have a little bit of an experiment and show you some of the techniques that I use. So this over dyeing technique is designed to kind of adjust the colour a little bit. So grab a cuppa and come and join me. So this is the skein that I'm going to be working with today for this tutorial. It's Blueface Leicester, it's a nylon mix, it's sock weight and it's 2-ply, as you can see there. Now I'm going to do an over dye on this. As you can see, it's very bright. If you remember from my tutorial video a couple of weeks ago, I used primary colours just to illustrate how one of the immersion methods works, really. But you can see it's predominantly yellow. We do have some greens, we've got some blues, there's some reds and quite bright oranges as well. So this technique that I'm going to use will bring these colours down a little bit. I'm probably going to over dye in a bath that is very, very pale grey. So it'll be interesting to use this as a comparison, a before and an after, as it were. This is Rogue. She is having a snooze. She is the yarn guardian. So yeah, so that's what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to treat this as I would any other dye. So I'm going to pre-soak the yarn next, and that's what I will show you. So here we go, popping the yarn into soak. This is just plain water. It's a little bit warmer than room temperature, but it's not hot at all. So we just want to get that pushed down, let it open those fibres up again, and that way it'll take the dye really well. There we go. So I'm going to leave this to soak probably for about half an hour, maybe a little bit more. We'll have to see how it looks, but you can see that those fibres are already opening up. It's blooming quite well. So the next time, the next little bit of footage will be of me probably mixing the dye.
So as ever, when mixing anything to do with dyes, especially the powders, they can be very bad for your lungs. I have a fantastic respirator face mask, very important. You can't hear me very well. And also my gloves. I've not got an apron on today, but I'm wearing some old clothes that I don't mind if dye splashes happen on them. I only ever use them for dyeing, so there we go.
So here's the yarn. It's been pre-soaking for around about 3/4 of an hour. You can see it's all fully wet, fully opened up. Looks good. I think this is about ready. And don't forget, this is just plain water. Now the reason for pre-soaking is because it helps open the fibres up, it helps it take the dye a lot better. It's a step that you really shouldn't scrimp on. So depending on the yarn I use, sometimes I pre-soak for several hours, and sometimes just 45 minutes to an hour does the job. So that's what I found with this here. Now I have mixed my dye. Now remember what I said about the dye powders, the pigments that I use. I use professional grade acid dyes. So those powders are very, very fine, and that's why it's essential to wear PPE. It's essential to have your mask on. So I've used two colours here. I've used a grey and a blue. It's very pale. It doesn't look particularly pale in the pot, but of course I'm going to be diluting it further. So if I just drop a little bit of this on here, there we go. You can see it really is very pale indeed. Now I use a little bit of kitchen roll to test my colour on, not because that's how it will show on the yarn, but it just gives me a general idea of how it's going to look. Now also, if you watched my tutorial last time, you will remember that I said, and it's very important, so I'm going to reiterate it again, is that any equipment that you use, oh please focus, there we go, any equipment that you use is very, very important that it's only used for dyeing, and that's it. So the next step that I'm going to do is I'm going to pop this dye stock in my pot, and then I'm going to move the yarn over into the pot and let it cook. So I've popped that dye stock in my pot, and you can see, if I can get it to focus, I put this spatula in there. You can see how pale it is. It really is just a hint of colour, and that's all we want to create the effect that I'm aiming for. So I'm going to pop the yarn in and take some more footage. So this is the yarn I've taken out of soaking, and all I've done is given it a really gentle squeeze just to get the bulk of the water out. So what we'll do is we're going to pop this straight in the pot. There we go. Now this is cool water. Obviously I'm not going to be putting my hands in hot water. Don't do that. So this is cool water. You can see that started to shift the colour a little bit already. So I'm going to heat this very slowly. I want it to come up to around about 70 to 80 degrees, but I'll be able to tell when it's done when the dye is exhausted. So you can see how there's a lot less in there already, so I know it's sticking to the yarn, and you can see how that yellow is a little bit more muted now, and the same with some of these oranges that were present before. So it's very interesting. We'll see what happens. It will be a subtle shift, but sometimes that's all you need. So I'm going to leave this to cook for a little bit. I'll zoom out so you can see how it looks. And there we go. We'll check back in when it's cooked. So here we go. It's been cooking for, steamy, around about an hour or thereabouts. We're just going to take its temperature, but I am pretty confident that it's done, and the reason for that is because I can't see any more of that pigment in the dye bath in the actual water. So yeah, now it looks like we are coming up to 80 degrees, which is around about where I wanted it to be. Yeah, that looks about right. So I'm going to get my spatula and just test it. There we go. You see there's no colour left. Now you can already see that it's muted to a certain degree. There are still some bright spots, and that's great. That's part of the experiment and part of the process. But you can definitely see that those yellows have sort of shifted ever so slightly into more green shades. So I'm going to let this cool a little bit, and the next time you see me, it will be rinsing. Oh, I did want to mention that the acid that I've used in this dye is just vinegar. Again, just like before with the experiment that I did, you can use vinegar, you can use citric acid. There's a few bits and bobs that you can use with different types of dyeing. If you were to have a go at Kool-Aid dyeing, that just needs a little bit of acid as well. Kool-Aid dyeing or food colouring dyeing is probably the safest method to have a go yourself at home if you wanted to. You can buy Kool-Aid on the internet. I do know that many of our food colourings in the UK don't quite work so well because we've got really quite strict standards as far as what's food safe for colours. So there we go. Like I said, next time I see you, this little beauty will be rinsing. So one thing that I did want to talk about is, what do I do with my dye bath when it's used? Now that is a really good question, of course. Conserving water, etc. is very important. So what I've got here in this tub, I've got some neat vinegar, and I'm going to show you how I ascertain the pH, how acidic it is, because I can use soda bicarbonate to neutralise the acid. So pure vinegar here with my handy dandy litmus paper, pop that there. So on the scale, pH 1 or red is most acidic, and pH 11, which is very dark green, is most alkali. So that's pure vinegar. Obviously I use a diluted form. This is some of the dye bath that I've just been using. I've taken it out. You can see it's still steamy, it's still very hot. So you can see that is acidic. I would put that around pH 5, maybe towards pH 4, somewhere in between. whereas this is obviously much closer to pH 3 on towards pH 2. Now in the last one, I've got plain tap water. Now I live in a hard tap water area, so I expect this to go a little bit more towards green, yeah, which it is doing there, you can see. So that's about pH 7, which is pretty neutral. So what I do, as you can see, this dye bath is clear because all of the pigment has been taken out of it. So what I do is I actually reuse the bath because it's still acidic. I can add more pigment to it and I can add more yarn or fibre to that too. Now if I was to want to neutralise that for safe disposal, then I would add a little bit of soda bicarbonate to it until the litmus paper started to show it as a neutral, not acid and not too alkali. So there we go, for science. So this is the yarn that's just come out of my pot. It's cool enough to handle. It's a little bit warm, but not hot. And I've just got a sink with equivalent temperature of water. Very important when you're working with wool is that you don't shock the fibres too much with an extreme temperature change, as that can cause it to felt. So let's pop this in and see how that is going to look as it rinses. There we go, let's turn around so you can see. There we are. So if you remember earlier on, there was an awful lot of very bright yellows, and you can see with the over dye that I've done, we'll have to wait until it's dry to get the full effect, but a lot of those yellows, there's still a few little bits present, which is lovely, but a lot of those yellows have shifted into green, and the reds are not quite as bright and in your face as they were, and the blues have sort of evened out a little bit better with the green. Now I could choose to over dye this again with a similar technique, a similar amount of pigment in the water, and it would shift it further and further. Indeed, some of the yarns that I produce do indeed go through a lot of individual processes like this to achieve the effect that I would like, but this was just for the sake of showing you really as a demonstration. So if I put my hand in, you can see there's no pigment in the water, which is fantastic. That means that it has worked. So I'm going to get this out once it's rinsed, and I'm going to hang it to dry, and the next time you'll see me, all being well, it will be fully dry and we can see the finished effect. Brilliant. So this is the before. Have a really good look at it. I'm going to turn it over. There we go. Next up is the after. Exciting stuff. So this is the after. I'll pan up really slowly so you can see. There we go. So you can see it's a lot darker, if I can get that to focus. It's a lot darker than the original colour. It's not so dark that it's lost its original character, but those colours have shifted. You can see that these reds have sort of shifted to a more rusty colour. These yellows are much more in the green sort of side of things. The blues are a little bit more muted. But yeah, I'm really happy with how this has turned out. Now I used a mixture, if you remember, of grey and blue pigment, which is what has helped the yellows shift like that. So I'm going to skein this and show you it so you can have a good comparison between the before and after. So here we have it as the skein. I'm going to zoom in so you can have a really good look. I have to say that I am in love with how these reds have shifted into those rusts and how that is playing with the yellows and the greens. Really pleased with it. So I hope this illustrates to you that when an over dye is mentioned, it doesn't just mean a change from, oh, I really don't like that red or that orange, I'm going to dye it a really dark brown instead. It doesn't have to be that dramatic. With a little bit of practice and a bit of experience, you can calculate your pigment use to do this sort of subtle work. Yeah, I'm really pleased. I hope that this has been useful and interesting to you. I'm going to do a few more different sorts of tutorials about indie dyer life at some point in the future. If you did like it, please let me know. It really helps me know if this is the sort of content that you would like to see. So there we go. Thank you very much for joining me, and I hope you have a wonderful and safe evening.